All right, welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is Alex Carmen. I'm with the Department of Public Service, and I'm joined by my colleague Alicia Sullivan, who's a Deputy Counsel with the Department of Public Service. We're going to talk about the COVID-19 residential and small business disconnection moratorium with a focus on municipalities and municipal water providers. Before we get into it, I'm going to go over a few ground rules today. First off, this meeting will be recorded and posted to the department's website along with the slides. So if you want a copy of the webinar or the slides, just look for them on the department's website in the coming days. If you can't find them, just shoot us an email and we'll provide an email address at the end, or you can follow up with us. We're going to handle questions either at the end, if folks want to raise their hand, or else you can add questions to the chat. So just if you have a question, shoot it in the chat. The chat's being monitored, or else just hold it to the end and we'll have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. Please stay muted, of course. This is a remote meeting. It works best if everyone who's not speaking stays muted so there's no noise. I think you will only be able to unmute yourself if someone on our end clicks, so that should be no problem. But again, like any other meeting these days, please stay muted. And finally, all the resources today that we're going to discuss are on the Department of Public Services website, and we'll go over that, how to find those resources at the end. All right? So let's begin. All right, again, welcome to today's webinar. The target audience today is municipal and public water authority providers. The moratorium we're going to talk about applies to a lot of different services, but we wanted to focus on municipal and public water authority providers today. So the topics we'll cover are which municipalities are covered by this moratorium law, kind of the general rules that are applicable, the eligible customers, who is eligible for the moratorium protections, the timeline of the moratorium protections. There are essentially two periods, and we'll explain to you what those periods are. The customer notifications, how municipalities need to communicate with their customers about the moratorium. What is a deferred payment agreement? We'll go over that. The rules about liens and re-levies, which will affect municipalities more so than will any other service. The implementation plans that the department would like you to file. The registration and enforcement provisions, which the department will enforce. And then we'll leave plenty of time at the end for questions and answers. So that's the broad overview of what we'll talk about today. So first off, myself and my colleague Alicia, we work for the Department of Public Service, and you also hear about the Public Service Commission. So what is the Public Service Commission or the Department of Public Service? Well, our motto is safe and reliable service at just and reasonable rates. The PSC and DPS set the rates for electricity and natural gas, private water companies, and we have some oversight over the telecom industry as well. We do a lot with utility safety, especially gas and pipeline safety, and we oversee power plant and transmission siting. My colleague Alicia and I, we work in the consumer complaint part of the business as well as enforcement. So what is the distinction between the commission and the department? Well, the commission, right now there are 4 commissioners. Those are the voting members of the agency. So those commissioners are appointed by the governor, and the department is the staff arm of the commission. And I'll hand it off to my colleague Alicia.
Thank you, Alex. So this portion of the slide is really about the background and about the moratorium legislation and specifics. So last year, as many of you know, in June of 2020, Governor Cuomo signed the original shutoff moratorium law, and this was really the first in the nation to have it in legislation. This applied only to residential customers, and it covered the services of electricity, gas, steam, water, landline, telephones. There were 2 provisions in the law. During the state of emergency, there could be no shutoffs due to non-payment. And then there was a second piece of the original law, 180-day provision, once the state of emergency ended, that would allow continued protection from shutoffs. That piece of the law never came to fruition because the state of emergency is still in effect today, and the original law did sunset in March of this year. So in this year, June 5th, 2021, Governor Cuomo signed a new shutoff moratorium law. This was an extension and an expansion of this law. It added in small business customers in addition to residential customers, and it added a few services to be covered, cable television and internet. Again, this current law has two different provisions: protection from shutoff during a state of emergency, and then an additional 180-day period, which will begin no later than January 1st, 2022. This current law does expire next year on June 30th, 2022. Next slide. So the key on the shutoff moratorium is that this is a grace period. There's been some confusion, and what we've heard about the last law is that some consumers believe that it's a arrears forgiveness program. However, this is a grace period. It gives customers time to work with their service providers, to sign DPAs, and we'll get into that more later, but the bills at the end of the moratorium are still due. So it's important that customers really understand this distinction and are educated about what they can do to protect their accounts. So from now until the state of emergency or until December 31st, 2021, whichever date is earlier, the state of emergency is currently in effect through July 5th of this year. That may be extended, we don't know, but that is subject to the governor, and they will put that when they issue executive orders. If the state of emergency, that will be that's on the governor's website. So there can be no disconnections or terminations for non-payment. The utilities must notify customers of these important protections. The utilities must notify customers of the availability of a deferred payment agreement, which cannot include late fees, penalties, and interest. And the utilities are required to reconnect customers within 48 hours if they contact them and say that they're not able to pay and they need a reconnection. So again, the second part of the law, the 180 days, which would start after the state of emergency ends, or the end of the year, whichever comes first. Eligible customers must self-certify and contact their service providers to certify a change in financial circumstances due to COVID-19 to protect their accounts from disconnection. The utilities at that point would engage eligible customers to negotiate DPAs with no money down, no late fees, no penalties. And again, the utilities must reconnect customers who are disconnected within 48 hours. This law will sunset at the end of June. Next slide. So the covered entities under this moratorium law applies to the regulated entities that the Public Service Commission has jurisdiction over, but again, we're just covering for this presentation water, not the gas and electric at this point. We're just focusing on the municipalities. So that would be the city, the town, village, county, water districts, public authority, water districts. This is in Public Service Law 89L. This moratorium also applies to the waterworks companies who are already subject to the PSC jurisdiction in Public Service Law 89B. Some important distinctions here: the shutoff moratorium for water customers does not apply to community and non-community water systems, which are not municipalities or public authorities or companies subject to our jurisdiction, for example, mobile home parks or campgrounds. And this moratorium does not apply to sewer, wastewater, or stormwater services. This is a common question that we are getting. It does not apply to sewer. Next slide. So who are the customers that are covered and protected by this moratorium? Again, like the first law, residential customers are covered by this law. The definition of a residential customer is in the Commission regulations for water customers. And the definition is a residential customer is any person who, in accordance with an application for service made by such person or a third party on his or her behalf, is supplied with water service by a utility at a premises where such service is used primarily for his or her residential purpose. And this is important as well to remind providers that this applies to residential customers, but it also applies to non-residential accounts who are serving residential premises. For example, landlords, apartment buildings, and mixed-use residential commercial buildings who are served through one water meter and who are serving residential customers. Next slide. So the second category that was added in this amended law was small business customers. And the definition of a small business customer is in the law, but I'll highlight it here. These are businesses who currently have 25 or fewer employees. The business is not a publicly held company or a subsidiary thereof. The business is not seasonal or short-term or temporary. The business is not a high-use customer, which is a definition that will be defined by the Public Service Commission through the consumer complaint process, and that the business does not have the resources to pay its bill. So small business customers must self-certify to the municipality that they're eligible for these protections, and the municipality can challenge a small business customer's eligibility or their ability to pay. As of all of our complaints in the Public Service Commission, the utility and the municipality has the burden of proof to show that the small business customer would not be eligible or that they have an ability to pay their bills. The notice of ineligibility, if there's a denial, must be in writing, and it must provide the small business the reason for those determinations and explain to the small business customer how they can challenge this determination through our consumer complaint process. So all disputes about eligibility will be resolved through the department's consumer complaint process. This is the authority that we have through this law. We have enforcement to protect customers and make sure that they are ones that are eligible are able to get these protections. Next slide.
All right, so I'm going to talk about the self-certification piece, especially the self-certification piece for residential customers. So as my colleague Alicia said, there are essentially two periods to this shutoff moratorium. The period we're in now, while the COVID state of emergency is in effect, is an absolute moratorium. So municipalities may not disconnect residential customers right now for non-payment. However, when the state of emergency ends, or December 31st, 2021, whichever date is earlier, that begins the 180-day period. All right, so again, two periods, the absolute moratorium we're in now and the 180-day period, which begins later this year or early next year. During the 180-day period, customers must affirmatively contact the municipality to protect their accounts from disconnection. So if you have a business practice of disconnecting customers for non-payment, if the customer then contacts you and self-certifies a change in financial circumstances, then the municipality must protect their account from disconnection for an additional 180 days. So the self-certification should use this language. It's kind of simple and basic. I attest that due to the COVID-19 state of emergency, which began on or after March 7th, 2020, I have experienced a change in financial circumstances. The municipality should record this self-certification in their business records. The customer can make it orally, they can make it in writing, whatever works. Make this as essentially simple as possible for the customer and reduce the administrative burden for the municipality. So municipalities must accept a residential customer's self-certification. So there's no requirement that a customer needs to document the change in financial circumstances. However, to promote engagement with kind of non-communicating customers or chronic non-payers with arrears predating COVID, a municipality may ask a residential customer to document their change in financial circumstances due to COVID. Now, that's not to kind of hold the customer really to a higher standard, but that's really to engage the customer and try to work with them. I think we've heard over and over that municipalities and utilities want to work with their customers, but it's the customers maybe that are reluctant to reach out or that are just hiding from bills temporarily. So we want to give some tools here for municipalities and utilities to kind of engage with their customers and promote education and awareness. But, bottom line, the documentation requirements should not be unduly burdensome on either customers or municipalities, and the municipality must accept the residential customer self-certification. If you want to take a look at some sample self-certification forms, if you want to include that, like in a bill insert, the department doesn't have those. However, a lot of your counterpart municipalities throughout the state have already filed those kind of forms. So you can go onto the docket and look for a community near you or a community about your size and use one of those as an example. They're pretty simple. They're, a page or less. And we'll go over how to access the docket later in the presentation, but there are plenty of examples out there. There are instances where a municipality may require income and asset documentation, and that's tailor the terms of a deferred payment agreement. In those instances, when the customer is going to enter into a deferred payment agreement, you'll probably want them to at least fill out a sheet which explains how much their income is each month and how much assets they have. Okay, the moratorium law places upon utilities and municipalities a duty to restore service. So if a customer was disconnected for non-payment during the state of emergency, the municipality has a duty to restore service within 48 hours. When the customer is eligible for the moratorium, so when they fall into one of those eligibility categories, and the customer's water was shut off for non-payment during the state of emergency. Right, so if a customer calls up and says, hey, I want to be reconnected, then the municipality has an obligation to go out there within 48 hours and reconnect the customer. The one exception here is shutoffs that are necessary for health and safety of the customers or for the general public. So if there's a backflow situation or flooding, that's not covered by the moratorium. Municipalities may disconnect to protect public health and safety. Right, the law requires that municipalities notify customers of their rights. So municipalities must provide notices to eligible customers about their rights under the moratorium and do so at the same frequency that the customers receive regular bills. So it's something that you've got to include as a bill insert or bill message in every one of your regular bills while the moratorium is in effect. And that notice should be in writing or via electronic transmission. So if you mail out paper bills, you should include a message in there or an insert. If you send bills electronically through email, you should include some sort of message in there, but it's got to be in writing. There are sample customer notices from other municipalities in the docket. So again, if you want to take a look at what other municipalities are doing, just go into the docket and there's plenty of samples in there. In that notice, the municipality must make a reasonable effort to contact customers who have demonstrated a change in financial circumstances due to COVID. So what that means is, if you have a class of or a group of customers who have not paid since COVID, those are probably the folks you want to target with additional notice and, make them aware of their rights and the assistance available under this law. You're also required to offer affected customers a deferred payment agreement for their arrears. And again, we'll go over DPAs in just a moment. These customer notice requirements are the minimum requirements, right? So the bill insert or bill notice with your bill is the minimum requirement. We strongly believe municipalities should use all the channels available to them to promote customer engagement and whatever works for your communities, right? So if you have social media, if there's a town Facebook page, if you've got robocalls or reverse 911, if you've got a community of non-English speakers in your community, if you've got an electronic sign on town hall, if you've got town meetings, if you've got, if you can just go door to door because you know the people who are behind on their bills, whatever works for your community. So it's not just the notice requirement, but it's broadcasting the rights and the assistance available through the channels that work in your community, whether it's a big city or a small village. All right, so the law requires that municipalities offer deferred payment agreements to customers who have been financially impacted by COVID. So what is a deferred payment agreement? It's an installment plan for customers to pay their arrears. And I will qualify this that a deferred payment agreement is different than a deferral, which we understand some municipalities offer to their customers, or it has been the business practice of municipalities to offer to customers who have fallen behind on their water bills. A DPA, a deferred payment agreement, must be fair and equitable, considering the customer's circumstances. So again, it should be tailored to the customer's income and assets. While the moratorium is in effect, municipalities must provide eligible customers with the right to enter into or restructure a DPA with no down payments, no late fees, interest, or penalties, right? So there's no kind of upfront payment to get into a DPA. You can sign the DPA. Any late fees should be removed from the DPA, and it's just an installment payment above the regular customer payment. Again, municipalities may require customers to document their income and assets. That's to tailor the DPA to the customer's financial situation. And for a DPA to remain active, customers must make timely payments of both their current charges and the installment payment of the arrears. So a DPA requires you to pay all your current charges in full, plus the installment payment for the DPA to remain active. Arrears that are part of a valid DPA must not be considered unpaid and may not be subject to lien. So long as the customer is paying their current bill and their DPA charge each month, then you should not consider that those arrears unpaid. Those should be considered, the customer's making timely payments on that. Finally, municipalities must offer DPAs, but may also offer payment deferral. So that's what I was saying at the top here, right? So, but if you do that, if you offer both a DPA and a deferral, you've got to properly notify your customers as to the difference and the consequences of these two types of agreements, right? So you can offer both, but make clear to customers what are the consequences of signing into each agreement, right? So the DPA requires you to make your installment payments right now, and the deferral kind of pushes it out a couple of years, but then you're going to have this huge bill out a couple of years. So make clear to your customers what are the terms and consequences of each type of agreement, the deferred payment agreement and the deferral. You can offer both, but explain both, but you must offer a DPA. Right, there are terms applicable to all customers in a DPA. The law requires no down payment, and that DPAs do not include late fees, penalties, or interest charges. Those must be excluded from the DPA balance. The period of the agreement must not be limited to the moratorium law, so a DPA is not just for a year or until June 2020, but it's however long it takes to pay off the arrears at the monthly or periodic payment charge. The customer must pay all of their current bills on time for the DPA to remain unbroken, and the agreement must be in writing, signed by both parties. Now, for residential customers, terms require installment payments of up to 1 month average use, or 1/10 of the balance, whichever is greater. And if you bill on a different cycle, quarterly, semi-annually, what have you, then just prorate for your different billing cycle. And if you want to see more of the legal authority for a DPA, you can look at the Commission's regulations, and there's the citation for you, 16 NYCRR, section 1410. Now, for commercial customers, the terms are a little less lenient. The installment payments are up to 1 month average use, or 1/6 of the balance, whichever is greater. And again, prorate for different billing cycles. And if you have questions about how the commercial DPAs work, there's a citation, 16 NYCRR, section 13.5. All right, just a note about broken agreements. So if a customer fails to make an installment payment or make a regular payment, you should give the customer a reasonable opportunity to keep the agreement by paying any amount due under the agreement. But if thereafter the customer continues to fail to comply with the DPA terms, you should give the customer an opportunity to restructure the DPA. So if the payment terms are just too steep for this customer, then you should try to offer them a more lenient DPA with a lower installment payment. However, if the customer continues not to be able to make payment and the DPA is broken, if that happens during the moratorium will still apply. So this customer should not be shut off for non-payment. However, if the DPA is broken after the moratorium law sunsets, then the municipality has discretion to pursue collections through its regular course of business. All right, I'll pass it back to my colleague, Alicia.
Thanks, Alex. So the new moratorium law added some additional details about liens that are used by the municipalities. And the law precludes and prohibits the municipalities from placing, selling, or enforcing a lien on real property for unpaid water bill. This includes all the water charges, the taxes, and the fees. This lien prohibition applies regardless of whether the municipality uses shutoffs to effectuate collection. This was a question we've seen that many municipalities do not shut off. However, this lien prohibition applies whether shutoffs are used or not. It also applies to municipalities who use liens for convenience sake. Now, while the state of emergency is in effect, lien prohibition applies to all eligible customers. After the state of emergency ends, a lien prohibition applies to eligible customers who self-certify that they've experienced a change in financial circumstances due to COVID, and customers with valid, unbroken DPAs. So after the state of emergency ends, all other customers who have not self-certified, who have not engaged with the municipality, the municipalities may provide a disconnection and a lien, but they have to provide 30-day notice and give the customer their rights and obligations under the law before they're allowed to re-levy or disconnect a customer. Our best advice here is to consult with your municipal council about the liens. There are other provisions of the law that are in existence on liens. However, this law prevents any liens being placed on. We've had a lot of questions on this. There was a question that came up that asked, can a late fee be added prior to a DPA remain on the account? So Alex, what's your thinking on that? I think it matters about the time, right? So again, this law was signed May 11th. That's the effective date of the law. So anything before that, whatever happened before that, the municipalities were not covered by this. After May 11th, you have to follow these provisions.
I would say, Alicia, that late fees are generally discretionary. Whether utility or municipality charges a late fees, it's usually not required. It's a discretionary charge. You should probably excuse those. You should do it. If it's in a DPA, I would say probably no. Then you should exclude the late charge from the DPA. But like Alicia's saying, it maybe depends on when the late fee was added. If this was something that was added several years ago that predates the COVID state of emergency, then maybe. But you should probably remove late fees. I would say that. How about that?
Yeah. Next slide. So as a result of this law being passed, there are provision in the law that the department would issue a definition, and we issued administrative guidance as a secretary notice in May 24th. So this is in the Commission's document management system under docket number 20-01676. You can find the docket on our website, www.dps.ny.gov, and click enter 20-01676. All of our municipalities should register so that they get email notifications. Hang on one second. Apologize. So this way, if a municipality registers in our DMM, they will get all the notices that are issued by the department in this case. They will also get notices sent by other providers, so you'll be able to see what's going on with the other municipalities. So as part of our guidance, since there are two parts of this law, the state of emergency and then the 180 days, the department is going to issue additional guidance when the 180-day period begins. And of course, until that is done, assume that the state of emergency is in effect and you cannot terminate for non-payment. So the guidance is verbatim the statute, and the guidance begins actually on page 16, and that's where you should start in terms of how it affects your day-to-day operations. The guidance does require affirmative customer contacts before additional protections apply for the 180-day period. And again, this promotes customer engagement. It allows for additional discretion for utilities to ask for documentation with non-communicating customers, and any requirement that's implemented by the customers to provide additional documentation should not be unduly burdensome on customers. Next slide. So the initial filings by the covered entities here were due June 3rd. We, of course, are accepting late filings. Many of the municipalities have not previously been covered by the Public Service Commission, so we understand if there's an education curve, a learning curve here as to what the department and what the commission requires. The municipality should file the overall implementation plan and a copy of the notice that's going to be sent to the customers. These are very important documents, again, because the commission has enforcement authority under the law, and if a complaint is filed, these two documents become part of the administrative record in terms of what the municipality has notified the customer and how they were going to implement the law. So we're also asking for final reports to be due by the end of July next year in terms of the number of customers who availed themselves of these protections by each customer class, the residential and the small business customer class, the number of new DPAs that are entered into by each customer class, and the number of customers disconnected for non-payment of the customer class. These final reports and the plans can be filed with the Secretary to the Public Service Commission in this docket, and it can be emailed also to the Secretary at dps.ny.gov. Next slide. So last, some administrative details again, because again, a lot of these municipalities, we do not have information on them. They've not previously been subject to the jurisdiction. We don't have contact information. So as part of the administrative guidance, there's a form that we ask all the municipalities to fill out. So it has all of our contact information. And that form should be filed with the utility moratorium mailbox that we've established. It's utility.moratorium@dps.ny.gov. And when and if a complaint is filed by affected consumer, this is where the department staff will be able to know who to contact for the municipality in order to investigate a complaint. Customers must contact their municipality. And I'll hand this over to Alex for a minute.
Sure. So if customers can contact the department through a variety of means, but before the customer contacts the department, they should try to work it out directly with the municipality. That's a requirement of our complaint process, that the customer makes an attempt to work it out with the municipality first. However, if the customer is still unable to resolve the dispute with the municipality, they can file a complaint with the department. There are 3 ways to file a complaint, basically 3 ways. The customer can either go online and fill out our web form. They can call our 1-800 number and talk to a rep, or they can send something by mail to our Albany address. Either one of those ways will allow the customer to file a complaint. The department will investigate complaints, shut off moratorium, and may direct municipalities to take action, such as reconnecting the customer or offering a DPA. All right, so I'm just going to go through a couple of common FAQs we've received in the past few months, and then we'll open it up for all questions and answers. So one question that's come up frequently is our district or town provides wastewater services as well as water. Are these services covered by the moratorium? The answer is no. The moratorium does not cover wastewater services, only potable water services that are provided to customers. Those are the only services that are protected from shutoffs. I don't know if that towns shut off sewer. I think that would create a health problem, but to the extent that Towns also offer, for wastewater services. Those are not covered by this moratorium law. Question, our district does not terminate water services for non-payment. Do we still need to provide notices to the customers? I've heard from a number of communities and water districts that they just don't use disconnections as part of their collection activities. But do they still need to provide these notices? So they still need to follow the law? The answer is unequivocally yes. All water districts are subject to the provisions of the moratorium law now in effect, even if the district is not shut off for unpaid water bills. The districts are prohibited from disconnecting water service to residential and small business customers for non-payment of their water bill, and must send the required notices as directed by the Public Service Law. The notices must be sent in the same frequency that the customer receives a regular bill. Same goes for offering deferred payment agreements, and same goes for the prohibition on liens or re-levies. So even if your town does not shut off customers for non-payment, you still must provide the notices. You still must offer deferred payment agreements to customers, and you're still prohibited from placing, selling, or enforcing liens or re-levying water charges onto the customer's tax bill. Question come up. Our district offers its water customers a deferred or deferral. Is that where they offer to defer the entire bill until the end of the moratorium? Is that sufficient? So the answer is the law requires customers be offered a deferred payment agreement in accordance with the Home Energy Fair Practices Act. So that's the terms we talked about, the installment plan where the customers pay their regular bill plus an installment charge. The agreement under the moratorium law requires no money down, no late fees, penalties, or interest be added to the DPA principal, and payment of the outstanding charges over a specific period of time. All right, so again, towns and water districts can offer a deferral. However, they must offer a DPA to customers, and they must explain the difference between a DPA and a deferral and what the consequences of both those agreements are. All right, are there model example notices or self-certification forms available for review? So the answer is yes. Go to our website, www.dps.ny.gov. Top right corner, click search, then enter the docket number 20-01676 in the search field. This will bring you to the full docket, including all the filings made by your counterpart towns and cities throughout the state. And finally, what if I still have questions about the moratorium? We're happy to answer them. So please just send us an email. We have a dedicated mailbox for questions about the moratorium. It's utility.moratorium@dps.ny.gov. We do our best to answer questions as quickly as they come in. We're happy to answer whatever question you have. If it's a more involved question, we can set up a meeting, but the best place to start is just to shoot us an email to utility.moratorium@dps.ny.gov. All right, so we have at least 20 minutes now and more if we need it to answer questions. So if folks have questions, they can add them to the chat. I see a few questions there that were sent to me privately. You can also raise your hand if you are on the web version of WebEx, and we'll unmute you and you can ask your question that way. So the first question I have here is, if there is no DPA, can normal unpaid bills be re-levied, including the admin fee? So Alicia, do you want what can you do with re-levies and DPAs right now?
So, Brandon, I think that the law has some nuances in it, and we'll just say that. But again, for the municipal water providers, the key is to looking at what Public Service Law 89L said. So the beginning of that statute says that no municipality shall terminate, disconnect service, or place, sell, or enforce a lien for the duration of the state of emergency, right? So remember, some of the triggers in this law depend on where we are, what date are we in. We're still in a state of emergency, you can't terminate, and you can't place a lien. After the state of emergency ends, there are different provisions, and they could use a re-levy, but again, after the state of emergency ends and with notification. This law is big on customer notification. So you have to give the customer 30-day notice. But if there are any legal questions like this, again, I would refer you directly to your counsel for the municipality. But the law is very clear during the state of emergency, there cannot be any liens. So the deferred payment agreement is a separate issue, right?
Yeah. I would also say that the greatest likelihood is that the state of emergency will be in effect, or at least portions of this law will be in effect later this year in November, when you would be normally re-levying these charges. So this will affect the town's ability to re-levy these charges this year. That's why we're trying to provide as much information as possible about what's going on. Again, it's a grace period. It's a temporary law, so it's possible that next year you could re-levy the charges. But for this year, more likely than not, that this law prohibits the towns from re-levying charges. All right, there was another question. If the town bills water and sewer charges on the same bill and a DPA is entered into, will the amount of sewer need to be subtracted from the bill and the difference re-levied? So I would say yes, the sewer charges can be re-levied. They're not covered by this law. It's the water charges that have to be excluded from the re-levy. So whether or not a customer enters into a DPA, you cannot, or probably not, re-levy the water charges this year, but the sewer charges may be re-levied. All right, got another question here. We bill our water quarterly. Once offering a payment plan to a customer, do we need to bill them monthly? For example, if the payment plan is $50 a month, do we need to send them a bill every month for $50? So I would say no. If you bill quarterly, then the installment can be prorated to whatever your quarterly billing amount. So if it's a $50 incremental or installment charge to pay down the arrears, then you bill that quarterly, so it's $150 on top of the customer's regular bill. So whatever your regular periodic bill is, that's how the DPA should be paid. Misha, do you want to handle the next one in the chat?
Sure. So the question here, given the complexity of the law and the failure of many municipalities under the previous law to send notices or send inaccurate notices, would the department entertain providing a model notice? What I would say is the prior law obviously is expired now. So all we're operating in is the current law. And the current law requires the municipalities to send notices. Right? So that is the legal documentation that they're supposed to do. And where the department would really get into enforcement is if and when there's a case in controversy and a customer is disconnected or a customer is not offered a DPA, a customer is shut off, they're alleging a violation, right? And then communicating with the municipality, the first thing we would look at is, did they tell the customer? Did they send a notice to the customer? What did the customer know about this? Obviously, that would be a violation of the law to not send a notice, and that's where the department would certainly get involved. The one thing I just highlight, this law applied to over 1,000 entities, right? So the water entities that were not previously under the public service jurisdiction were not known to the department. We have no communication with them. And the enforcement provision is the enforcement of the violation of this law. So what I would say is each and every piece of this law is different depending on who is implementing it. There is not a one-size-fits-all notice. The law says you must give notice. So if an entity does not give notice to a customer and there's a complaint, that's a problem. But I would encourage every municipality to follow the law and to send notices because that's what's required.
All right, any more questions? Please type them into the chat or raise your hand. We're happy to answer them now. So will a copy of the slides be made available? The answer is yes. So we'll post them to the department's website. We have a specific website or a subsite that deals with consumer issues. It's askpsc.com, askpsc.com. The likelihood is we'll post it there in the next coming days. And if you entered your email address into the form to get into this webinar, we have your email address then, so we can just push out the slides to you so you have a copy. Any other questions? So let me just show folks real quick how to access the docket in case anyone has questions. So you go to our website for the Department of Public Service, www.dps.ny.gov. Then you go to the top right here where it says search, click search. On the search page, you enter the docket number, which is 20-01676. Click search. And that brings you to the entire docket. So you can see all the communities that have filed implementation plans. You can search by community or by the name, by document type. It's a pretty robust way to search through this site. You can also find the administrative guidance on here. You can go to the top right corner here, subscribe to the service list so that you get notices whenever something is posted. We encourage you to subscribe to the service list so you get the push emails about what's happening. But in any case, you can just go to the website and also search here.
Like we have another question in the chat.
All right. Does the provision in HEPA regs noting DPAs as low as $10 per month still apply if income warrants? So the $10 minimum DPAs are only in the energy regs. So because we're dealing with water here, we think the most informative or applicable commission regulations are in Part 14, which deals with residential water customers. So I'm not sure there's a $10 minimum in the water regs. However, the municipality should again tailor the agreements to the customer's financial circumstances. So if a customer it's a low income or indigent person or household or family, then you can't obviously make them pay a lot because they won't be able to pay their DPA. The DPA should be affordable to the customer. So I got another question. If a person defaults on paying current charges after a DPA is entered, what can the municipality do? So first, you should give the customer an opportunity to try to cure the missed DPA payments or to restructure the DPA. So try to work with the customer to get them to, pay something or get back on that DPA and start making regular payments. However, if the customer, breaks the DPA while the moratorium is still in effect, the utility may not disconnect that customer until the moratorium ends. Once the moratorium ends, then the municipality can resume its regular, collection activities. But while the moratorium is in effect, you know, even if the customer breaks the DPA, the law prohibits the municipality from disconnecting the customer. And there's a question about how to get the slides. So I'll put that in the chat. We have a website, askpsc.com. So just go to that link. We have a page now with FAQs that's really kind of targeted at consumers, but we're going to put some information up there for municipalities as well, including a copy of the slides from today and a link to the webinar presentation and maybe some other material to help municipalities implement this law. I think if you found out about this webinar through an email that you received from the department, that also included links to the department guidance, to the registration form, to the docket. So if you got that original email, which was sent late last week or early this week, then you should have links to the docket and to a variety of resources that may be helpful to you. We have a few minutes left here. Any further questions, please type them into the chat or raise your hand. We're happy to unmute you and answer the question.
Hi, Alex. I just want to make sure everybody knows how to raise their hand too. If you see your name in the participant list and you hover your mouse in that area, a little hand will show up and you click on that and that's how you raise your hand.
All right, looks like we have a question. Aaron, do you want to unmute?
Sure, I sent a request to unmute yourself, Diane.
Go ahead, Diane.
Diane, you've been unmuted.
Yeah.
Diane, you seem to be having some issue with your microphone. Can you please just put your question in the chat then so we make sure we don't miss it? Thank you.
All right, last call for questions. Either raise your hand or else just type it in the chat. And again, if you want to discuss anything offline, we can happy to do that through email. So question just came in. Will the department issue any guidance as to what constitutes an affordable DPA, i.e. some percentage of a person's income? Right, so again, the DPA rules are contained in Part 14 of the Commission regulations that govern how much the customer should be paying each month to pay down their arrears. So we're relying on the existing Commission regulations as they apply to residential and non-residential customers.
Right, and the only thing we'll just emphasize is that the DPA rules under the statute says no money down, no pay, no interest, no late fees. But all the other rules are clearly applicable, and to the extent that they're a little too detailed and you have questions, again, reach out to us. We're available. We've been doing a lot of training and a lot of calls and a lot of questions. It's a new law and it applies to entities that have never been covered. So we're very happy to help in any way we can.
All right, we got another question. Can we re-levy the unpaid sewer portion of the bills with a fee this year? So I'd say the answer there is yes. This law does not apply to sewer, so you can re-levy sewer charges with whatever fees that the town already charges. All right, we'll do one more minute for questions if anyone has them. Like another one here. So with the current law, it appears the villages who collect taxes in June will be able to re-levy in 2022. Am I correct?
So it all hinges on the state of emergency ending either sometime this year or at the latest the end of this year. So after next year, the re-levy is possible upon notification to the customer. And when the law is expired, obviously, yes, everything goes back to the way it was.
Yeah, so like Alicia said, I would say it depends on the state of emergency, whether that's still in effect, and the timeline. So it's possible that for villages, if you're re-levying, this year obviously wouldn't work, we're in June, but next year it's possible, but again, depends on the timeline. All right, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. It's 11:30. I want to thank everyone for participating. Oh, we got one more question. Let's try to handle this one. So can we just put a sticker on our bill that says, if you are unable to pay your bill due to financial difficulties as a result of COVID-19, contact the water department to enter into a deferred payment agreement. So I would say that's a start. I would say though that you probably should do something more than a sticker or one or two sentences to inform customers of their rights. And I would encourage you to go on to, again, go to the docket and look at what other communities have done, because you'll probably find that it's not really a heavy load or a tall burden. I think a lot of communities have just simply put in like a one-pager or less than one pager, which explains the customer's rights under this law, provides them with the opportunity to enter into a DPA, and meets the notice requirements. So a sticker is probably not enough, but there are plenty of examples out there in the docket which you can just copy and which will be sufficient for this purpose.
Right, and remember too, in the law, it mandates that there has to be reasonable efforts to contact customers who've demonstrated a change in financial circumstances. So yes. We're trying to look at the ceiling, not the floor. So do as much as you can to engage customers, give them as much notification that's substantial enough so that customers really know what they need to do and what protections are available to them. We thank you for that.
All right, so I just want to thank everyone for coming. I hope you found this informative. And again, if you have any questions, please reach out to us. We're happy to answer them. Just shoot us an email to utility.moratorium@dps.ny.gov. And the slides and webinar should be posted to the askpsc.com page in a few days. We'll try to also push it out to email if you gave us an email. So thanks again for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.